Okay, hello, who will begin? Okay, as we have seen a few occasions already, the shift toward abstract art is very often accompanied by a certain distance taken with the territory, and this, you could say for a painter, it will mean also the landscape. And in also, even as we have seen with Droit, even also of the nation, you know, because of course these two notions are linked in a way. A nation is linked to a territory, to a history. And the moment you want to take distance with that, to detach yourself from it, of course, the two goes together. And of course, the two examples of that, maybe the more striking, are the Droit, who not only have discussed, you remember I quote you this phrase, I hate all nationalism, and that live in exile for the end of his life. And Riopel also, in a way, because even if he came back to Quebec toward the end of his life, he never behaved like the prodigal son, you know, being all tame and no critic on his country. In the contrary, he kept this distance. He made his success in Paris in a way, and he was not too keen to be associated to anything nationalist here. And there was also, of course, a return to figuration, but I think I tried to show you last time that this return was done in a very original way, because in a way what we were returning to was kind of absence in a way, you know? Shapes that are not really there. Yeah? And this, you could put it in other words, this type of attitude also, by the type of reference, let's say, that these painters have done to the landscape, to the territory, and then how they detach themselves from that. And today we will see another example of this, where finally you get the impression that the reference, or the referentiality of the painting is the painting itself. So for a while you have a kind of reference to something outside of painting, and then suddenly the more and more we go, it seems more and more closing on the painting itself. And Fernand Leduc, of which we will speak today, is obviously less popular than Riopel, but what can I do? You will see, is an interesting case. He have also expressed very strongly this idea of the necessity of detaching himself from any form of nationalism. I have a quote here that I tried to translate as best as I could, but where you will see it's exactly this idea was expressed. He says, a form of art which is at first sight national or even international will only reflect qualities belonging to the nations. A universal form of art will instead express human qualities. Whatever the color of your skin, whatever nation you belong to, art will reach you only through its human qualities, only through what is essential. Communication works only at the human level, human to human. And this kind of striking formulas are a little bit also ambiguous, because what exactly he means by human? I understand well that you want to say that if you want to be at a universal level, you have to go very deep. You have to go where all the particularism are left over, and where you are really working at a certain more profound level. But what exactly it was that? And the question could be asked, because when you see his own painting, I will show you in parallel two paintings of his, who are, oops, that's not the one. Yeah, who are in, let's say, apart from, not even 10 years apart. The first one is called La dernière campagne de Napoléon, the last campaign of Napoleon. So it demands a little bit of explanation, and it's of a painting that is in automatiste in style, and it's of 1946. And the other he called Le Rouge et le Noir, maybe in allusion to a famous Stendhal novel, but red and black, let's say, so just a name given just of the color of the painting, and it's of 1955. Both of them belongs to the artist. And so if we have to, from his work, try to find out what he means by human, obviously there's two definitions here implied, and if they are not contradictory, at least they are very distant. In the first one, he explained himself that the painting was done with almost mechanical, I would say, process. The kind of white spots that you see here and there on the painting, like here, were obtained by rotating the painting on a kind of axis, if you want, and just throwing paint on it. And so the randomness of these spots is absolute, if you want. The background, of course, is a little bit more complicated. Have been painted before and are a little bit more elaborated, but not much. If you go to the manifesto of the Refus Global, of the total refusal, or whatever translation you want to give it, there is a section there which is called Commentary on Current Words, who was written by Bourdieu himself, even if it's not signed by him, in which he makes a kind of lexicon of terms that are used in his circle. And one of the terms, of course, that he tried to explain is automatism, because, of course, it's an important term. And he distinguished between three types of automatism. One he called mechanical automatism, and it's exactly an example of that, in a way. He says this is when the painter uses system like, for instance, folding a paper. If you put spots of ink on a paper and you fold it and you open it after, you obtain a certain pattern that is not too controlled. It's a little bit like Rorschach spots, if you want. You could have what the certain surrealists, not many have done this, what they call fumage. They were taking fire and approaching it to the canvas, and then let's say the smoke pattern could be done on this. And he speaks of rotation. We know, for instance, that Maxians have done that. He put in a can of paint some black paint and then pierce a little hole, and then with a wire like this going like this, and of course you obtain crazy lines all over the place. This is what will be mechanical automatism in terms of Bourdieu. The two others are the psychic, let's say, psychologic automatism, and then he put people like Dali, like Delvaux, Magritte, a kind of depiction of the dream. So, and finally, there is the automatism of his group is the surrationnel, over reason, so rational, if you want, in which we'll come back to it. But if this is indeed a kind of a more mechanical type of automatism, an example of that, then it will mean that it's a painting in which the subject, in which the human subject, let's say, is put aside, and as if to coincide with the, I would say, with matter itself, you try to put in parentheses as much as possible the painter, the one who made the painting. Of course, and Bourdieu says this is wonderful because it has the plastic quality of nature, of the universe, if you want. You could obtain effect like, say, a rock that you could see, maybe a bark of a tree, or anything that you can find in nature in which you will have a pattern, and that will be given like this. So, in a way, you recreate conditions who are analog to what nature can do, and you create pattern also can be beautiful. He says, but of course, they are not very good to reveal the personality of their author, of course, because the author is like put in parentheses, is like absent from it. But he says they can be used as excellent paranoiac screen. And so what he means by that, of course, it's a notion that he takes from Dali. It is also, I think I explained to you 2 times ago about Bourdieu being very surprised to see in a text of Breton a mention of Leonardo da Vinci telling his students to go to see whole walls and to see cracks, and then from there to have suddenly the revelation of a subject matter possible for a painting. And okay, so this is a little bit also the same idea here. the painting obtained that way by just spots and colors or seems to be put in random are an excellent paranoid screen in the way that it's like the wall of Leonardo da Vinci in a way. The spots there could be used then to create forms and to imagine other forms, and it could start, let's say, the processes of creation. And by that means, you could say also that it could reveal a little bit the personality of the author. Already the title given to the painting is a kind of an interpretation of what was done. If you call it the last campaign of Napoleon, well, you make an interpretation of it's there, and you reveal maybe, and Leduc, I don't know which superego, you see, maybe he sees himself like Napoleon, or having finished with the whole painting and the last campaign, and whatever the subconscious or unconscious motivation that could be behind this. But you see, even then, even with this type of automatism, you could have that. What it means in terms of the human, a definition of the human, of course, is the importance of the unconscious. It is a vision in which let's say, human behavior is not explained only through reason or only through consciousness. There is also a part of our behavior who comes from the unconscious that are unknown, and that all these automatic process are supposed to reveal, are supposed to put us in contact with. And for Borduas, this is the unknown. That's why it's interesting, and that's why painting should be a kind of progressive conquest of this unknown area of human mind. So you see, there is a certain philosophy or a certain conception of human, of what is human, that could be applied there. And you could say it's universal. Everybody have an unconscious, everybody have dreams, everybody, whatever culture you are, whatever place you come from. And so you could say it's universal. It's a definition of the human at a universal level. The other painting is among the very first geometric abstraction, and I would say non-referential abstraction of Leduc, since what you see, it's what you get in a way. It's just lines, squares, even right angles only, and flat color, painted almost with the hard edge technique. I say almost because it's still painted with a brush. But as you know, to obtain a real hard edge effect, painters of today use masking tape and don't paint with brushes anymore, but with rolls, and so to have this kind of very impersonal finish in a way. And you could see here what is expressed in the contrary to the other painting. It's rationality. It is order. It is the absolute control of the painter on what he's doing. And indeed, in the same commentary on current words, this part written by Borduas in Refus Global, you have a little definition, a little bit more cold, a little bit more distant of what is abstraction, what is called plastic abstraction, meaning this type of geometric abstraction. And he says basically it's an object, well, a painting, let's say, voluntarily constructed and who finish in a kind of very regularized form, or you could say you obtain formalized type of form. It's a very, very regular, I think the word he uses is régulier, a regular form. Then the important word in this definition is the word voluntarily. Because that means that to make a painting like that, you have to know where you go. You have to make a sketch. You have to have an idea of what it will be. You have to choose your color carefully. You have to choose to draw your line and all that. In the other hand, in their vocabulary, you could say you have to have an intention before doing the painting. And this, of course, have absolutely nothing to do with automatism. Because by definition, an automatist painting is a painting non-preconceived before being done. Leduc didn't say, oh, I should do la dernière campagne de Napoléon, how I will do it. No, he did a painting, and after, he find this funny title, or he decided to call it that way. He could have called it number 2, number 3, anything. So because there's no intention or there's no project in the mind of the artist before doing the painting. In a way, the painting elaborates itself in front of his very eyes. Slowly, it built up, and at the end, it could get a title. So you see, you have then two different worlds in a way. One in which the unconscious is very important, the other in which is almost excluded. One is like spontaneous, if you want, the other much more controlled. And this is the, let's say, the problem of Leduc. How to explain that? How to explain that he started with this and then finish with the other type of painting, and what it means. So to answer the question, I will proceed in three sections. First section, how Leduc came to become an automatist painter and produce a painting like the one you see on the left. The second question, it is why he quit that? What was the factor, or what was the influence that suddenly made him feel this is no more what I should do? And finally, why to choose geometric abstraction of any other solution? He could have come back to figuration, he could have done whatever you want. Why to go in that direction? Okay. The first question is relatively easy to answer when you know the biography of the artist. Up to now, I've not too much insisted on that, but in the case of Leduc, first, he's probably a little bit less known than Riopelle, let's say, or Borduas. And on the other hand, it's very relevant. Leduc is born in Viauville, so the older people here will know where it was. It was around the biscuit Vio, the whippet of my childhood. We used to eat this stuff terribly. And this was a little bit south, let's say, of the Botanical Garden and more to the east, where Vio Street is today, and close to the river. So there was this big factory, and around it, of course, there was a kind of little village built, which was called Viauville, and now is part of Montreal. But at the time when Leduc was born in 1916, it was considered like the outskirt a little bit of Montreal at the time. So what happened to him? He went to college, like in Saint-Vincent-de-Paul, a little bit out of Montreal. And then, as it was, it happens a lot at the time, the class was visited by a brother recruiter. There was many, of course, groups of religious Catholic hoarders and all that, and they came in school and they tell the kids that is the best thing to do in your life is to become a brother or a priest, or if you are not rich enough, you make a brother. If you are a little bit richer, you go to the priesthood. And they were recruiting like this really children. Leduc says in a recent interview that he was 11 years old when he decided to become a brother. And, but habitually we say 12 years old, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It's very young. So suddenly he goes to what we call a juvénat. That means a kind of place where, out of your house, where you are a pensioner and you are in pension. Let's say you don't have contact with your family. And at 12 years old, in Iberville, so it's a completely different place. And after a year of that, at 13 years old, he began to have throat aches and things like that. He was examined by doctor, and doctor says, oh, you should be operated, but the brothers there, so this is too costly, and probably they didn't take him too seriously. It was probably, at the time, nobody knew about psychosomatic illness. It was probably a clear case of that. He could not speak anymore. And so then he continued, nevertheless, to be in this system with the brothers, up to 1936, so almost 10 years of his life he was with them. And then he was sent to different places, and he continued his studies to be a teacher, let's say, even with this problem of voice. Finally, it becomes so ridiculous, this thing, that they were postponing the operation and they were not really healing him, that he decided to quit not the priesthood, but the brotherhood. He take refuge in Quebec City at an old aunt, but of course the old aunt didn't approve that. This was not nice, so he went back. And then he negotiated a little bit his coming back to the Brotherhood. And he asked them, is it all right if I can go to the School of Fine Arts and learn to be an artist instead of a teacher, since my voice is no good and all that. So first they were conciliant, they said okay. And then when he was supposed to make his final vows, that means at the second year of Beaux-Arts, then he assumed that he will continue to study there, but his provincial, I mean the superior of the brothers there, told him, no, when you make perpetual vows, you go where you are told to go. You don't decide yourself of your future. So he find it so gross in a way that then he decided to quit everything. And he explained later that took some courage at the time, because these people were going back to their family and they were the shame of the family. You see, the family was very proud to have them in these religious orders, and if you quit that, you become almost a kind of outcast in your own society. So, but for Leduc, this was not too bad, except that, let's say, the first year he was at Beaux-Arts, he was with a cassock, with a robe, like a priest, if you want. The second year he was without it. He changed his name also. When you are in this community, habitually they give you a new name. So he was called Charles Garnier in the community. I remember I had difficulty for that, because when I was making research in the archives of Beaux-Arts, I was looking for his name. And where is Fernand Leduc? There was no Fernand Leduc in class. I said, okay, people mistook, he's not there, and all that. But there was a brother, Charles Garnier, for a year there, and it was him, of course. Then the second year he come without any garment of a priest or things like that. And then he is in a kind of very different situation. In a way, so right away you see in Leduc a kind of refusal, a kind of revolt against a system in which he was losing his physical integrity, and also, I didn't mention it enough, but certainly the intellectual integrity. He begins to read a little bit the forbidden books, and as much as he could, and he saw the difference between the kind of the religious system he was taught and what could be. And there, on the other hand, he was at Beaux-Arts, and his, let's say, his colleagues were people who will become a little bit more famous after. Like, there was Pierre Gauvreau there already, there was François Sullivan, there was Adrien Villandré, maybe the people know less, but there was a little group of people who were discussing all the time about modern art, because, of course, Beaux-Arts was still directed by Monsieur Maillard, and Maillard didn't want to hear about modern art. He called it les ismes qui font courir Paris, meaning all the isms that make Paris excited, but have no interest whatsoever. And he wanted his school, of course, to teach academic discipline, you know, drawings, and at the end a little bit of color. So the students were discussing, of course, they were not idiots, they could read, they could see what was happening around. So Leduc fall in this group, and then he became more and more interested, of course, to modern art, because he certainly felt that for him the solution was art. But which form? You see, the form that he could produce in the community where he come from was very traditional and very repetitive, and certainly without any originality. So the possibility of being a painter and do something else with this talent was evident, but you have to find a way. And through this group of students with which he was speaking and discussing and all that, he will meet Borduas. Before that, he saw probably an exhibition of Borduas that I want to evoke by 3 paintings that they were the only presentation. And you will see at the time Borduas was not at all what we imagine he will be. It's paintings that were presented in Société du Livre, a kind of book fair, if you want, organized by les écrivains du Québec, enfin les écrivains canadiens, like they used to say at the time, the Canadian writers. And it was a kind of small exhibition in which Borduas have this painting. It was a portrait of Maurice Gagnon. People asked me last time if it was if I was a kin or with Clarence Gagnon. I says no. But this is my father. So this one I'm related directly. It's a painting of 1937 that Borduas did. They just met in a way. In 35 they meet, and Gagnon will write the first article on Borduas. So as you see, there's some atavism in my family with this subject. We carry it for generation and generation. There was this painting. There was also maybe a little landscape like this. I think I showed it to you last time. It's a kind of maybe a view of Parc La Fontaine. Borduas lived nearby at the time, and maybe it's this. And finally, this little painting was called Adolescente, or in the style maybe of Maurice Denis a little bit. So nothing to really brag about. But nevertheless, these paintings have struck Leduc, and probably it was closer to the type of work that he was able to swallow at the time. And when Pierre Gauvreau told him, we can meet him, he make meetings at his studio every Tuesday, and we go there and we discuss with Borduas and all that. Why you don't come with us? So he remembered to have seen this. And in 41, the year after, he met Borduas. At the time, of course, Borduas was dealing already with the first attempt of automatism, like you can see in this painting. I think I showed it to you also. It is the green abstraction, the very first. Well, Borduas says this is the first automatist painting I ever painted, so we must believe him. And it's a little work like this that we have here at the museum, as you know. The other painter that was much more, let's say, in the front at the time is Pellan. And Leduc have visited also the exhibition of Pellan. What happened? Pellan was in Europe for 14 years. But with the war, he had to come back here. And during these 14 years in Paris, he was exposed to all the trends there, to Cubism, Surrealism, everything. He was very open to all that. Pellan is a sponge. He's an incredible, they have a capacity to integrate any form of art around him. He said once to André Breton, what I want to do is the synthesis between Impressionism, Fauvism, Cubism, and Surrealism. And Breton says, c'est ridicule, it's impossible. And I couldn't understand, because these movements in Europe are seen like one against the other. They are in sequence. But here we discovered them in the 40s like a whole. This is modern art as such. And so the combination of all this together was making sense for Pellan, but certainly not for Breton. And okay, this is an example of one of his paintings that was shown at here at the museum. Well, at the time it was the Art Association of Montreal, but and it's called Paysage à la femme devinette. Landscape with the hard to guess woman, I guess, or could be a translation of that. It's done in about exactly the same time, 1937, like the portrait of Maurice Gagnon that I just showed you before. It gave you already an idea of the two impressions that the two painters could do on young people like Leduc at the time. And Leduc, remember that the Pellan show was absolutely flabbergasting. It was fantastic. He was bitter. You have no words to describe it. Pellan was receiving also students in his studio like Borduas did. The two become to be the rivalry, if you want. But at Pellan, it was much more, how I should say, nice society. You see, Pellan used to cleverly invite all the art critics to his studio and to have collectors also coming. So the young people were a little bit lost in that. In Borduas' studio, it was very different because they were discussing their work with Borduas. And anyone who have direct contact with Borduas and could speak of that type of critique that he was giving, always speak of it very positively, as if Borduas have this pedagogic cleverness to find in each work of his student what is really original, what he should develop. And we wish on any art student to have a teacher like Bordua. And so Leduc compared the two groups and decided, well, Bordua is the real place where I should go. And then in 1942, when Bordua exhibited for the first time the gouache, then he says, okay, that's it. That's what we have to do. And you know, when they were presented as les œuvres surréalistes of Bordua, like surrealist work of Bordua. They don't look surrealistic, but they are done as non-preconceived, absolutely. Bordua described the way he was doing. He started with a sheet of paper, trace one line, and then another one, and then slowly the image built up like this, and then he do the same with a color. The first colors he choose at random, and then this first color bring the second one, and the painting get organized like this slowly. And at the end, he could give a title. The gouache have two titles habitually: a number. No, this one is number one, and very often a literary title, probably because the collectors who buy this, you say, you come back home and your wife asks you, what did you buy? It says number 22. So you cannot find something more exciting than that. So this one he called la machine à coudre, the sewing machine. And well, maybe with some imagination, you would see it more or less, like if you could see the body is here, this kind of big axis where there was. Of course, it's a machine à coudre of 1942. It's nothing to do with what we have in our home today. But you have this little manivelle you see on the side, and maybe the needle could be here somewhere. Anyway, whatever. La machine à coudre was a kind of very typical title given après coup. And you see, if you compare a gouache now of Leduc of 1944 with some of these gouaches of Bordua, like this one that I show in parallel, you will see that right away Leduc become like almost, I would say, the beloved disciple of Bordua. He will follow him very closely. And for instance, he will make a series of gouaches, most of them are lost unfortunately, who are very close in spirit and in technique certainly of what Bordua did. The one on the left have no title, and the one on the right by Bordua is called number 24, or La campagnarde à la tranche de melon. So, well, let's see, the peasant woman with cantaloupe or something, with tranche de melon. If you compare both, you will see that Leduc make a kind of weird face. You see here a mouth, you see a nose, two nostrils, and eyes, so I don't know where, maybe somewhere here. So, like a very deformed type of mask, or a personage who is almost horrible. This is closer, in fact, to the surrealist inspiration than Bordua goes never so far in that direction. Bordua, in a way, is closer to Pelin in this thing than he will have admit, but anyway, he turned in his tomb when I say that. But But you see, there is a kind of difference between both like this. And indeed, in some of the early drawings of Fernand Leduc, this influence of surrealism is very evident. Like in this charcoal who's called Sur la plage, on the beach, if you want, of 1943, you see like a kind of weird personage here. If you read like two eyes, and instead of a nose, she have a kind of an antenna like this, who finish in a flower. And then here you have a leg with a socks, and then maybe here a hand who goes up to the horizon in a way. And in front of her, there's a kind of beast who's very difficult, like a rat a little bit, and who have an extended leg here with claws. And we try to remove her skirt or something, revealing a huge breast here. The more you see this thing, okay, sometimes I have to stop because people become to be worried about my mental or my private obsession. But it's very close to more Dali or a kind of Dalinian type of presentation. And indeed, Leduc of all the group is the one who was the more literate in a way, because he had this good formation with the priest and all that. So he knew he was intellectually aroused, let's say, and he read all the things that we should read about surrealism. He was interested in Breton and all this, very often much more than Bordua in a way. Many of the ideas that Bordua knew about surrealism come from his students that were reading the stuff that he just grasped the general line, but they were reading the stuff. And like Claude Gauvreau did the same also. So he was certainly very aware of surrealism and all that, and he was interested in even in this part of surrealism. But then again, if you go a little bit later in time, and you put again in parallel what Leduc did and what Bordua did, you will see that then he goes in parallel with Bordua. The second, the painting that I show you on the left is called leur ombre, their shadow, their shadow. And it is a typical painting of trying to solve the problem of when you pass from a water medium like gouache is, and to an oil medium like you have here. And Bordua had this problem right away after the gouache. He made a gouache in 42, but in 43, some critics told him, if you don't make oil painting, it's not very convincing. It's too easy, the gouache. You know, it goes fast and all that. You could improvise. But what you will do with oil, how can you do? And indeed, the speed of improvisation that you have when you use a water medium, is lost with oil, because oil doesn't dry so fast. You have to take time. And of course, if you take too much time, you lose this unity of inspiration that you could have if you were working in a very short period. So Bordua took time to find a solution to the problem. And finally, what he decided to do is to divide the process in two steps. First, you paint the background. Then you let it dry. And when it's dry, then you could have few objects like this suspended in midair, if you want, in front of it, and then you have your painting, you have the spontaneity that is needed. And that's why this painting was called something viol aux confins de la matière, meaning rape at the end of matter or something. And also in his notes, he designed it as galaxies. And this is interesting because in a way it is a little bit that. The black background was painted first, dried, and then all the white shape that you see with a little bit of color, with a little bit of green and brown, and even the little star there, were added after, but could suggest something like galaxies in the middle of the cosmic night. And that was the solution also of Leduc here. He painted first the background and then added this kind of plant shape, if you want, in the foreground. And you would see both of them, in a way, exploit their kind of landscape of the mind. These pictures could be told referential because, in a way, they are not so far from nature. You could, with the Bordua one, make allusion to galaxies and to the night sky, and with this one with plants, or maybe underwater plants or something, some algae. So you can make this connection. So you could speak of a kind of referential type of painting, but also not completely figurative, not figurative painting, certainly not naturalistic. And again, so you see Leduc following the step of Bordua. Another thing that he did also was to have at his studio the group of the automatists coming to his place and discussing with him like they used to do at Bordua's studio. And why he did that, of course, because Bordua suddenly moved to Saint-Hilaire, out of Montreal. In 45, he is installed in Saint-Hilaire, so he's not so easy to reach. So the group felt the need to discuss together. So you have it here, an example of that, where Leduc is here, and Pierre Gauvreau and Claude Gauvreau, the two brothers are there. Then Marcel Barbeau is here, Madeleine Arbour, and this guy is Pierre Leroux, is less known. He didn't make his career in painting. He became, I think, comment est-ce qu'on dit, un réalisateur, somebody who works for TV at Radio-Canada. And on the wall, you have, the painting of Leduc, but here, on the right, this is a gouache of Bordua. Yeah? And it has a funny story, well, a kind of strange story, because it was bought by the group. The gouache of Bordeaux at the time was $25 or $35 or something. So they pooled their resources, each one put $5, and one, a richer one, Monsieur Villandré, put $10. And long time after, I showed this gouache in a lecture like this, and then suddenly a lady came to me and says, "Where is this gouache? My son bought it for $10 at the time, and he gave more money than the others. We should have it." But in fact, so it's a real problem of ownership, you see, where it. So the guy who had it, of course, eyed it well because he doesn't want really to. But at the time, they were exchanging it. So you see it in many photos of the time. Sometimes the studio of Leduc, sometimes the studio of Barbeau, sometimes in the studio of the other. They were owning it en group, if you want. There's another picture taken probably a little bit after, where the same group of people is there, Barbeau, Leroux, this is Claude Gauvreau, Madeleine Arbour, and Fernand Leduc. And here on the wall, I can show it to you, it is this little gouache of Bordeaux that is on the wall there. This one is small, as you can see by the photo, and it used to belong to Fernand Leduc. It's still in his hand, in fact. So he had bought this one. And the theme was Le Trou des Fées. This is a designation of a kind of cave that you have in the Mont Saint-Hilaire. Not a real cave because it's not very profound, but even from the ground you can see it. It's kind of a triangular shape like this, and so you could say that the black thing here was the grotto, and the pink shape will be the montagne, will be the mountain itself of Saint-Hilaire. So probably because it have allusion to the landscape of Bordeaux, it was interesting for Leduc, and also because it was a small size, so he could afford it. At the time, he was teaching drawings in schools, so he had a salary. He could afford a little painting. But you see then another parallel, let's say, with Bordeaux, the fact that he took a leadership in the group as, I would say, almost the theoretician, the thinker of the group, and he maintained this tradition with it. When finally, in 1947, he went to Paris, he was also the organizer of the first automatist show with Riopel. They were, both of them were there at the time. The first automatist show outside of Quebec and in Paris, in a little gallery who's called Galerie du Luxembourg, who doesn't exist since many, many years and have left no traces whatsoever. It was a very small place. It's not the Musée du Luxembourg like I've seen written many times, but Galerie du Luxembourg was a very, very small place. And they were just after the war, right? It's 1947. So the gallery were looking for new talents and things like that. And Madame Eva Philippe, who was the owner of the gallery, decided to take a chance with these Canadians. So they decided to make a show of the group. And this was the two paintings that you see there, were the painting of Bordeaux presented there. Riopel had some watercolor in this show. An example of this in that style a little bit. This is 46, 47, so it's about the time when they were showing in Paris. The painting that Leduc have there was an interesting painting. It's called Avalanche, and of 1945, exactly in time, let's say, to do it. And shows that the same system I was describing before, let's say, of the background painted first and then object painted above them, with kind of allusion to landscape, you have all this there, of course. Avalanche is a kind of theme that could evoke a landscape. So there's always this type of reference with nature that is maintained even in these more abstract paintings of the time. So as you see, up to now I would say, the evolution of Leduc is logical in a way. He got revolted by his religious, oppressive type of education. For him, to go out of this brotherhood was a question of mental health and I would say physical health also. And then he was really finding in Bourdieu and in surrealism a new meaning to his life in a way, and developed like quite logically up to there. This brings us to the time of Refus Global. When Refus Global was published in 1948, Leduc was already in Paris. So he knew of the text of Refus Global through mail. Bourdieu sent in a copy of it, he still have it, and he could read it in Paris and decide to sign it or not, as Bourdieu asked also. So he signed the manifesto without problem. Not only that, he sent also a page, I have it here translated by Ray Ellenwood, but it gives you, not only he translated it, but it gives you a good idea of how it looks also. Very violent declaration. You see that, that if you want or not, a new civilization will be created on the ruin of the ancient one, and we have to prepare the advent of this new civilization. This is the big event. Anyway, and ceci sera at the end, and this will be at the end. So this is the contribution, let's say, of Leduc to the manifesto. He sent this paper. And up to now, you could say, well, this is a perfect accord, it's perfectly logical. But then there is a letter who follows a little bit, few months after, in which Leduc says, okay, now that Refus Global is done, there are certain terms in Refus Global that I would like to be discussed, or to be revised even. For instance, he says, surrational automatism. For instance, desire, for instance, magic, for instance, revolution. And then he says, my God, if you have to revise all these notions, there's no more total refusal. The manifesto doesn't exist anymore. And then he goes to say, well, the non-preconceived act. Okay, so then he's attacking, of course, the very idea of an automatist painting. He says, the non-preconceived act is but a fraction of the truth. It doesn't give us all the truth. It can be recuperated and degraded, as one can see among the surrealists. What he meant there, indeed, you could imagine somebody who make a very spontaneous type of painting, obtain a certain style with this, and then copy his own style, or exploit, if you want, his own first attempt to automatism. And so then it become, of course, intentional. It become not only not preconceived, it become very preconceived. You have a model, and instead of having for each painting a kind of new risk, finally you have no more risk. You know how to do it. You say, okay, I spread a little bit of paint here and there. I call it a funny title, and that's it. And he was accusing the surrealists to do that in a way. And in a way, he was right, because the surrealist movement in 1947 is a very old movement. And it's 20 years that they repeat the same scandal and the same thing. And they were, let's be honest, they were completely outdated. In Europe, in Canada, of course, nobody knew much of them. So they were new for us. But in Europe, of course, it was dépassé, if you want. So Leduc said that. And in a way, you could say, Bourdieu could agree with that. He could agree with that the recent surrealists are not as interesting as the first one, as Miro and as, I don't know, say Tanguy or people like that. And so there was a kind of the danger of repetition, the danger of a style, let's say, of a surrealist style that will be all defined in advance. He says instead of that, we should follow the advice of the Bhagavad Gita. And then when I said that, I said, wow, Leduc becoming an Hinduist, quoting a famous quote, something that sounds like this: do what you have to do, but without paying attention to the act itself, and renounce to the fruits or to the result of the act. This could be quite close to a kind of Hinduist type of principle, in which, for the sake of spiritualism, okay, you do some action, but you are detached from the result. You don't pay attention to the result. You want only to do good, but you don't want to be praised or to be a little bit of that side. He says this is what we should do, and in a way, this is really sur-rational. This is supra-conscious, and this is what we should do instead of automatism. So This is surprising. So what happened to Leduc? Why he changed suddenly his mind, and why he bring this quotation from the Gita in the middle of that in a letter to Borduas? Borduas will be very surprised by that, by the way. There's one factor that explains it. He is quoting, in fact, not the Gita directly, but through another author that he just read. And this author is not very well known, but anyway, I will try to explain you who he was. Raymond Abellio. You write A-B-E-L-L-I-O. Raymond Abellio. It's not even his real name, it's a pen name in a way. His name is Georges Soulès, but he always make, all his books are titled by Raymond Abellio. And Abellio wrote a novel in 1946, or just after the war, was called Heureux les Pacifiques, happy are the peace, lover of peace. And he got a prize for it, and it's a kind of dubious story. Somebody who cheat on his age to go to the war and then discover the terrible aspect of war and become more of a pacifist. I summarize it very briefly, but it's more or less that. Then the year after, he published another book called Vers un nouveau prophétisme, toward a new prophetism, which is not a novel at all. It's much more elaborated. At the time when Leduc becomes to read his book, Abellio is in Switzerland and is accused of collaboration with the Nazi. And he was condemned, not being there, but he was condemned to 10 years of forced labor, so I guess the accusation was very serious. He was supposed to have been part of a little group who is called La Cagoule. La Cagoule is, what is this? It's a thing that people, thieves put on their, how do you call this? A hood, wait, a kind of hood. So La Cagoule they were not nice people. They were very extreme right collaborators with the Nazis. And this Abellio was part of this. So he was, of course, condemned after the war by the resistance. So that's why he took refuge in Switzerland. Leduc pretended that he didn't know about that at all when he read it, and he never heard. Then he was rehabilitated, and this is even more strange in a way, because he pretended that because of his participation to this extreme right group, he could reveal who they were and give some information that brought their condemnation or brought their capture, if you want. So indeed, in 1952, Abellio is rehabilitated, come back to France, and then could meet Leduc in person for a little bit. Bon. On the other hand, when you read Abellio, you find things in his text like he will give praise to Laval. And Laval, as you know, was the Prime Minister of France during the Vichy regime, and very much, of course, pro-Nazi also. He will also condemn the reprisal after the war by the resistance. Maybe, he gave the impression to want to be above the party, but there's a limit, of course, to how above you can be when the issues are of that kind. And then the more bizarre aspect of his text is his enthusiasm for Gnosticism. That's the nice word that I wanted Anita to help me with. And let's say to any esoteric doctrine, he speaks of the Kabbalah that I don't know he understands well, but he says the Hebrew letters corresponds to numbers, which is true. And then through that you could make a kind of numerology. You have people today who are interested in numerology. When they grab you, say, well, when were you born? So you give your name, and they add all the numbers, and then finally they find that you will be very lucky next year. Well, so he speaks of that. He speaks of astrology. He speaks of spiritism and all these esoteric things. And the problem I had right away is, how come Leduc could be interested in that? What attracted him to this type of ideology? Very nebulous, very mystical, if you want. And he answered it. There is some. There was a book called Entretien avec Fernand Leduc, done by Lise Gauvin, who is a professor at the Université de Montréal in literature. And she asked him, of course, what attracted you to this type of thought? And he says, well, he gave few reasons. He says the first reason is that, he says, I have cut with a religion, and maybe I needed to replace it. And this is interesting, of course, because in a way, what is interesting there is not so much the exact content of Abellio mishmash. I have no way to describe it. It is the very idea of going back to a tradition. And for Leduc, what is attractive there is a tradition which is very different from his own. A tradition, he knew what it was because being raised as a Catholic and even as a brother in a kind of like les frères maristes, with a system like that, he had a tradition. But there was a completely different one. It was weird, it was strange, it was new to him. And of course, Abellio pretended this is the great tradition, this is the most ancient one. You have it since the beginning of time, and this is more basic than anything else. So I quit the religion. I needed to find something else to replace it. This is the first explanation he gave. Then he says, it was a way for me also to detach myself from Bourdieu and from the automatist. He says, we had did the refus global, we wanted to go further. We wanted to do something else. Yeah, well, for Bourdieu to go to this type of Abellio thinking was not exactly to go further, it was to go back and to go before. Anyway, but this another reason that he gave. And finally, I would read this in French, but you would say this is, I think, is the key. He says, Bourdieu se situait toujours dans l'anarchie, et moi, je m'introduisais dans une pensée de la hiérarchie. Okay, now you make an opposition between anarchy and hierarchy. He says Bourdieu was always for anarchy. And in a way, what he means there, it's Bourdieu was very much against any argument of authority. Meaning also that you have the right to question authority. You could follow what they tell you, but first you have the right to examine the authority. And this is, of course, there's no modern thought without this. This is, I would say, the minimum that you could ask if you want to be of today. What the hierarchy thinks that Leduc find in Abellio, it's not that at all. The authority exists. There's a hierarchy. There's people above you who knows and who are in the know, and you just have to obey. You just have to study what they have told you and just to repeat it and try to apply it in your life. So it's really going back to tradition, but also giving back the authority to this type of argument in which you have a revelation, you have something coming from outside of you. And you know, when he speaks of the supraconscient, it's not only something above you, but something exterior to you, something that comes from outside and tell you how to do, what to do, and what to, like a guide, if you want. And this is really what detach him of the, this was my second question. You see, what detach him from automatism and surrealism? It is this crisis that happened just after the refus global. It's amazing, it's in a few months. Through the influence of Abellio, the possibility suddenly of seeing things very differently. Needless to say that Bourdieu didn't approve that at all. In the exchange of correspondence between the two, at a certain point, Bourdieu have enough of this, and he says, votre monsieur Abellio, ça ne va pas du tout. Your Abellio, it doesn't work anymore. Basically, because not only Bourdieu doesn't want a supraconscient, something above, but he doesn't even make the difference between matter and spirit. He's a completely materialistic type of thinker. He's a monist, like you could say, only one reality, not dualism, no dualism. And so with Leduc, the distance becomes to be quite clear. What happened to the painting of Leduc during that period? This is a little bit surprising, but in a way it could be explained. You see, the painting he did in 49, for instance, so under the spell, let's say, of Abellio's thinking, is very much, it's still close to automatism. This one is called the lifting of the veil, and it's done exactly like I described before, with a kind of background painted first, and then maybe a shape who try to appear or try to detach itself from this background. They are a kind of not too satisfying type of paintings. They are bouché, kind of. There's no space in it, and the type of form doesn't detach really itself from the background, and as if poor Leduc was dealing with mud in a way. So he's in really. He's not afraid to be ugly, but on the other hand, he is not seeing any issue to that. And the few paintings of that period are all like this. This one is called Horse Head, because indeed you could read maybe the white shape here, like the head of a horse, maybe. This one is called The Father. At first you don't see, but look, if you read this like an eye, this like an eye, this like a nose, and then a mouth, and here a chin, you have a kind of face. Am I the only one to see it? No, ça va? Okay. And so this is what you could expect from the automatist process. You see, you start with the inform, with no form, and little by little, a shape could appear, could float on it. So in a way, there's a contradiction between this type of painting and what it was, the hierarchy and the order and the revelation from above and all that he's so enthusiastic about. And this is a typical problem of any painting. You could not translate ideas, even a very lofty one, in painting without attaching yourself to some other painting solution. You cannot just go on like this and try to put it. You need a pictorial transformation of this idea. You need to transpose them in painting. And obviously, in this painting, he could not do it. It is then that he made a painter. Instead of meeting a philosopher or a thinker, he meets a painter. And this painter is Jean Bazin. It's written B-A-Z-Z-A-I-N-E. Jean Bazin, the French painter, maybe not too much known today, that have published at the time in 1953 a little book. It's called Notes sur la peinture d'aujourd'hui, a note about the painting of today. Quite interesting book. I remember in my days at Beaux-Arts, we used to read it almost on knees. We thought it was very well written, very interesting and all that. And I'm not at all astonished by Leduc being enthusiastic for Bazin painting. What Bazin was advocating, it was a return to nature. He says we have to draw from nature and to paint from imagination. The drawing will give you form, will give you, I would say, almost a kind of a warehouse of forms. You know, you will have drawing through form in nature will make you suddenly your imagination richer. You will have a lot of forms, a lot of ideas, a lot of colors, and then you could make much more free painting. This one is called Terre et Ciel, earth and sky, if you want, and could be an evocation of nature, quite free, but certainly very referential in that sense, very close to nature, to whatever form that was started. Let's say in our collection of slides, we have very few. I think we have this Bazin, and that's it. And so I cannot show you much, but there was other painter of the same, very close to him also, that could be put in parallel, like, for instance, this one, Alfred Manessier. Manessier was closer to the Catholic Church at the time and made a lot of vitrage, if you want, and also tapestry and for the churches. This one is called the Night of Gethsemane, so I guess it's an allusion to the Gospel. And another painter of the same group also is Maurice Estève, E-S-T-E-V, Estève. This is a watercolor, maybe not too typical of his, but you see, all of them have this in common. They are starting from nature, and they transpose it, and they try to transform it in a certain way. And for Leduc, that was a solution. That was what we have to do. We have to start from nature, but then to detach of it and to get more and more abstract in a way. And Bazin was very important for him because suddenly he saw that there was outlet from the automatis, what I call the mud before, in which he was sinking, this kind of quicksand in which he was. And so it was like le salut. It was really the solution suddenly. And indeed, you will see this painting will change. Suddenly, some color will appear in that. Shapes also will detach themselves, and titles will allude to phenomenon of nature. Like this one is called rivage, like shores, if you want. So you could see these spots like highlands, and as if we were looking from above, from far to a landscape. This one is called spring. And again, the title given a direct allusion to nature, and even if it's abstract, nevertheless, it's a kind of lyrical type of abstraction, like it was a little bit the fashion in France, but not people extreme like Georges Mathieu or Vieira da Silva or Zawuki, the friends of Riopel, if you want, but rather this more quiet guy like Bazin, like Manessier, that nobody speaks too much about now, especially they are a little bit forgotten. Their master, for instance, was Cézanne for them. That was always the reference. We have to go back to Cézanne. Cézanne did the right thing. He painted from nature, and he created more and more free painting from the source. So they were less vocal, let's say, than Mathieu and others, but for Leduc it was a solid painter I could refer to. So he will go back to Canada in '53. And he will be very involved in the Canadian scene. He will organize, in particular, an exhibition at the Place des Artistes, of which we will speak next week. And in this exhibition here that I evoked by this caricature of Normand Hudon, it was called La Matière chante, the matter sings. So, of course, you see this old guy there trying to listen to one of the painting, and he says, "Cré bateau, j'entends rien." I don't know to... I don't hear anything anyway. La matière chante, but it doesn't chant très fort. And of course, the little guy here is Borduas. It's a good caricature of Borduas. So La matière chante, I think, if you were with me last year about Lemieux, I told you a little bit about this exhibition. This is the exhibition where Lemieux and Aline send false automatist painting and fool Borduas with them. See? Borduas accepted them and thought they were genuine painting. And then after, of course, they published an article in the newspaper to say, you are not so clever. Then Claude Gauvreau will attack them to say, you never did a better painting than the time you wanted to make fun. And because then you reveal your unconscious, of course, because you were not. Anyway, there was endless discussion with the style of the time. Today, if you publish like they used to do in these days, you will go to prison. You know, with a bunch of lawyers on your back. But they were insulting each other anyway. Well, but this exhibition, there was what was special there, if you want, and I want to show you what Leduc sent to that show. The works were chosen by Borduas. And he was photographed during the time of the choice of the painting. You see, he's here and looking at painting that were sent for the exhibition. And here, of course, is Guy Viaud. Maybe some of you remember him. He was the vice director of the National Gallery for a while, but he was a close friend to Borduas also. And here you see Borduas again going through the process of the picture. Here you see a painter who's called Gauguin, and behind him is the picture of, I don't want to make a mistake, yeah, it is this painting of Leduc. It's called La Voie et ses embûches, the way and its obstacle. And it's a painting of 54, I think, that he sent for this La Matière chante show, and was, of course, accepted by Borduas without problem. And which shows exactly the type of evolution he was going through. If you compare the photo here, you see, for instance, this line, you see that this is the painting that is behind this guy here on the wall. And it was chosen, and of course, Leduc was happy of that. And it shows also, the point where he was in his development. Wanted to integrate a form of nature, but on a free way, not to be never realistic, but you find maybe a kind of mountain shape, if you want, or something, an aspiration toward the top of the painting. Then all these striations that you see through indicating different direction, like this, like if we were constructing a little bit like nature grows itself. You don't imitate what you see from outside, but you work like nature. You work at the same type of rhythm and with the same invention, if you want. The other show, which will be very important the year after for Leduc, and where he will reveal a complete change of style, if you want, is called Espace 55. So what happened after La Matière Chante was in 54, in 1955, so the year after, Gilles Corbeil, who was a painter but finally become a famous art merchant here on Crescent Street. He used to have his gallery nearby here. Corbeil died since and left a lot of money for artists, which is a marvelous thing. Each year you have a prize like this of, it's bigger than the Prix Bordua, so it's really a lot of money. And he have from always encourage the artists and very close to the artist milieu. And Corbeil decided to make another show like La Matière Chante, in which we will have the new trend. And for instance, this painting was there. It's Patterson-Ewan, that people didn't know much about at the time. And it's, of course, not in the style of what he's more famous for today. You know that he used now scientific type of imagery of eclipse and the moon and things like that, more astronomical type of inspiration. But at the time, make this kind of big painting in the, you could see in the automatist style. So I will show you a little bit some of the participants of this. The only woman of the group was Rita Le Tendre. And of course, Le Tendre doesn't work like this at all today, but this was the type of painting she was showing there. This one is without title, but there was one, the title she gave to her painting there was called Jazz in Amsterdam. And also Le Tendre at the time began to develop this style with heavy impastos, a little bit like a Bordeaux influence. And finally, we'll go toward a more geometrical type of abstraction, this kind of big triangle that you may have seen that she does. So she was also at Espace 55. There was McCune also was there, but McCune, Jean McCune, at the time was doing what we call color field. It's kind of painting done with the hand, without brushes, with one or very few color, and in which there's no form, there's no background, you just have a field of color. He was influenced at the time by Sam Francis, an American painter that he met in Paris, and he brought these things who were, of course, very new for our surrounding here. You had Mousseau have this painting, it was called Libido. It's typical of Mousseau to find titles like this. And he succeeded to sell it to Dr. Ferron. But Ferron is Jacques Ferron, is one of the famous French-Canadian authors that wrote about the group. And he was, Mousseau says that he knew Ferron well because this Dr. Ferron, by the way, is the brother of Marcel Ferron, the painter. This is the same family. And Mousseau, he says, Ferron was my father at my marriage. When Mousseau got married with Mousseau, they went to the Protestant, of course, because as ex-Catholic, they didn't want to be married in the Catholic Church. So, but they needed, and of course the family disapproved that. So they needed a father. So he asked Ferron to be his father at his marriage. So they have, libido maybe have something to do. It's an in-joke between them. One surprising contribution there was this type of drawings that you see there. I guess if I ask you to guess who did that, nobody will know. It's Molinari. And he's not famous for this type of drawings, but indeed, he did that for maybe as a kind of aparte to his more style that we will speak of next time. Molinari he showed me once, I was at the time working on Dubuffet for my PhD thesis, and he says, Gagnon, you want to see art brut, because Dubuffet was sponsoring art brut. Art brut means art from people who have absolutely no training in art at all. Say, for instance, prisoners will make art brut, a psychopath, of course, also. People will be very, very marginal, and Dubuffet used to collect these type of works and get inspiration from them and whatever. And Molinari telling me this is art brut, it was very surprising coming from him. So it is indeed kind of weird drawings of faces, of personages and all that, and they are all signed. You see here. But the signature is changed according to the style of the drawing. This will create a very nice problem for historians of the future when people will come, could you authenticate my drawing? So this is not the signature. But he did it in purpose that he changed the style of the signature for each drawing. Finally, the contribution of Leduc there, we'll see, is very surprising. It is, we are now coming back to my first painting, in a way, the one, Le Rouge et Noir, that I showed you. This is called Point d'Ordre. It precedes just a little bit the painting I was starting with, and it is geometric, but not yet hard edge. If you see, it's really painted with the brush. You don't have these straight lines that you will have with hard edge. But the painting is called Point d'Ordre, like mean order. So it could be translated just by this word, the very opposite word, of course, of automatism. And this bring Leduc, in fact, in a completely different world. It brings what I was expressing at the beginning of this lecture, this kind of very controlled type of painting, very conscious of its means, and in a way also more and more or self-referential. This is a painting, in fact, that speaks only about painting. It is lines, it is color, it is shapes organized together, and what you see is what you get. There's not a kind of hidden meaning behind that. It is basically a painting that affirms itself as surface, and also as a series of shapes and a series of lines put together, and just as a triumph of order, in a way. And from then on, all the progress of Leduc will go in that direction. I will finish with that. I will just evoke few of the reaction of people to this exhibition. What happened is the following. The show Espace 55 didn't have as much success at La Matière Chante. And Corbeil decided, he says, why we don't ask Bordua to come, and he will make a few comments, the press will publish that, and it will make publicity for the show. So he called Bordua, who was in New York at the time, and he said, will you come to see the new painting of We Do, that we present at the museum now, and it will interest you. By the way, Espace 55 was presented here, in the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal. And when Bordua comes, visit the show, doesn't say a word, and after there's a little reunion between Corbeil, Leduc, Pierre Gauvreau, a few of them. So what do you think? What is your reaction? He says it's not good. He says, and especially I think he think of Leduc. He think of this painting is dépassé. He says it's archaic. Two words who are not complementary, you can be sure. So Leduc, of course, was very, very mad at him. So right away they go to the newspaper and publish a very negative article against Bordua. And indeed, you could understand why Bordua find it so bad, in a way, because this is what he was doing exactly at the same time. These are the watercolor influenced by Jackson Pollock, by Franz Klein, if you want, and by the abstract expressionists that he was discovering in New York. And so Bordua himself was integrating this type of art, and he says, you are wrong. You are going back to Mondrian, to the beginning of abstract art, to geometry. This is all dépassé. Now you are in abstract expressionism. We are doing things where the spot, il parle de l'éclatement, the kind of the bursting of the objet and all this, and the organization of the painting completely different. And of course, then Leduc says, the hell with your American mentors. We are in the real trend, because we are going back to the essence of painting. Our painting is not about the éclatement or whatever, it's about painting, and we will maintain this thing. So the two men were always in difficult relation since the Abellio event, since the, let's say, the criticism of Refus Global, now really are far apart à partir from this time. Mind you, after Bordeaux will go to Paris, will die in exile, and the contact will not be too many between the two men. But this was really the rupture, the end of it. And to finish, I just want to show you a few pictures of Leduc to see how I go back a little bit in time, but to show how really all this was done very progressively. This one is called Porte Rouge. The red door, and even to mention a door, which is a flat surface, of course, in a wall, it is to affirm the bidimensionality of the surface here of the painting, even if you have a little bit of breathing space because of these cracks here and there. But nevertheless, it's built almost in a very, very shallow space, and not evoking any profondeur, any depth. This one, Quadrature, and you see also the color get more lively with time. We are out of the mud since a long time, and it's 55, 56, and finally you get these very hard edge picture, like this one is called Nœud Papillon, the bow tie, and probably it comes from this little motif here on the top, and Lune de Miel, that kind of put in parallel, done. They are not big painting. You have to imagine about this size, and but they are very precisely done now with rulers and everything. And this is what Leduc was calling a universal language, where you get to the human essential, and not any allusion to any particularism of whatever. And indeed, they are much more colorful than anything he did before, and they are, strictly following the principle of bidimensionality, energetic color, that we will find with the plasticien even more. So this one, sometimes they have only a color as a title, like this one is called Vert, and green, without any other specification. Don't remember the date, but I will find it. Vert is 1961. So then it will sometime complexify itself. It will have new, for instance, here a kind of opposition between big area and lines, curve and straight line. It will become a little bit more complicated, but it's always very faithful to the principle of abstraction, of geometric abstraction. And to finish with this one, chromatisme binaire vert, or des titres compliqués, but it's not important. You get sometimes, and unfortunately, I don't have slide of very recent work of Leduc. He's still alive and still working. The last painting he did are very monochrome. They are one color, habitually a white, and they are not easy to grasp. A kind of big painting, all white, sometimes done with section like that. So to conclude, I would say he is an example of a kind of difficult type of path, but he is also interesting because you do have a kind of review of all the styles of abstraction in his days. You have the automatist and then the more geometric one, and also to see what was in the issue there, which kind of content finally they want to convey by one style and by the others. You should never reduce painting just to some aesthetic aspect. They have also, and especially for people like Leduc, they have also a thought behind, always some thinking behind. So next week we will finish the series, hopefully, with the plasticien that will even go further in that direction indicated by Leduc. Okay, thank you.